just wait for confirmation, because we had a bit of a sound issue. You could see me, but you couldn't hear me. So I'm just waiting for that. And yes, Karen has confirmed that it's perfect now. So I'll make a start. I'm going to start very slowly because I realized that with Facebook Lives, people get a notification if they've liked the page or they like the group, and need time to connect. But the main thing is to remember that even if you can't take part live, then this will be recorded and posted on the BrazTesol Mental Health SIG Facebook page, I believe. Maybe Karen can confirm that. So I'll make a start, and people can join as we go. So thank you for the introduction, Karen. This is the first time I've heard of a Facebook page or group dedicated by a local organisation, local association to the issue of mental health. And I'm particularly interested in the area of mental health. I've been in ELT, mostly as a teacher, since 2006. First volunteered in Tanzania, then went to South Korea, China. I've been to Saudi Arabia a couple of times, and also Vietnam, but I also taught in England as well on young learner activity programs and pre-sessional courses. So I have experience of ELT. I haven't been in full-time work consistently throughout that period. More recently, I did some research into the topic of mental health, and the reason is because I have an interest in this area, a personal interest, because I have myself struggled with poor mental health a lot in my working life as a language teacher, and I think I've counted 12 or 13 times now where poor mental health has adversely affected my performance or my reliability in the workplace. Many times I've suffered and I've had to leave the job early, maybe after a week or two, or sometimes I've started a course. I started a course in Norwich and I had to leave after one day because of I was getting anxiety about the course. I'm not going to go into detail about my own personal experiences, just as long as you know that I combine my personal experiences with my teaching experience, English language teaching experience. And more recently, I did a piece of research which was carried out last December. I only kept it live for 3 weeks because within 3 weeks I got over 500 responses. In fact, it was 501 responses from teachers and professionals in ELT from all around the world. So they're not just English language teachers, but all language teachers as well. Not just teachers, DOSes and ADOSes. And more recently, I've done a webinar for International House back in March, and then the big one, which was a talk in Brighton at the ITFL conference in April, followed by a workshop with ADOSes and DOSes for Lundosa in London. And more recently, I've done an ITFL webinar and a Q&A on the back of that, which I published on World Mental Health Day, which was October the 10th. And on that day, I had flown out to Malta, where I gave another workshop on this topic, improving the mental health of language teachers. I've dropped the English part because I know we say ELT, English language teachers, but a lot of people, it is not just exclusive to English language teachers. I want to point that out straight away. It's language teachers in general, and it's not just teachers as well. But we say ELT as a kind of catch-all term for our industry. Although, as Karen pointed out, I don't really like the term industry. I don't really think of it like that, but it is business. So this is for BrazTesol Mental Health SIG. This webinar was originally going to be on Sunday, but I realised there's something very, very important going on in Brazil right now. I'm not qualified to talk about it, and I don't want to talk about it, so I will leave you to get on with that tomorrow. But obviously it's a very testing and nervous time for Brazil, especially with this right-wing candidate possibly getting elected. So I have solidarity with Haddad and all those that are voting for him. Anyway, I'll move on because I'm not really qualified. I've not been to Brazil. I'd love to go. I've been invited by many, many people, and go one day. Yeah. And some of the people I quote in my talk and my workshops are from Brazil, and I know we've got possibly a couple of people from there, as well as the people that like the page. But a couple of teachers, friends of mine who are in Brazil, who are either watching now. I don't know who's exactly watching, but maybe we'll catch up with the recording later if they're not watching live. So I'd like to share something with you. I mean, I don't know that there's many people in the room. There's about 4 or 5 people in the room, but can you see this? This is an image that was shared on social media this week, and it seems to be doing the rounds. I don't know when it first started, but it's an image with some faces. I don't know if you can see that. I think I saw it on an Instagram post, and I reshared it on Instagram, and I thought it was very interesting, and it's very true, in fact, because depression is one of the most common, if not the most common, mental health conditions. I would say, and obviously you may recognise. Do you recognise any of these people? You may well do. I mean, yeah, Robin Williams is there, Amy Winehouse is there, Marilyn Monroe. I think that might be James Corden, and I'm not entirely sure if that's a young-looking James Corden, Kurt Cobain, obviously. And what connects these people and what connects this image, as you can probably work out, is the fact that they're all smiling, they're all laughing, and you know, what we know about depression and smiling depression in particular is that people mask a depression, and they cover up the fact that they are depressed, and they go through and they suffer for very long periods often. And try to pretend that everything is okay, a little bit like the song Tears of a Clown, where, mask on my face, it's there to fool the public when it's a love song, but it's just that idea of mask and how we present ourselves in everyday life. I mean, depression is something that I've had. Depression is something that has struck me low for very long periods of time, months and months. In fact, it was a couple of years, 2014, 2015, when I wasn't employed that much, didn't do much in the way of teaching, I was underemployed, didn't have regular work. Thanks, Luke happened to be a friend of mine, and thanks for joining me. He's also in Norwich, but he's not with me at the moment. I mean, signs of depression. I mean, Fernando, in his recent talk about the black dog in the classroom, drew on this thing of depression, that a person who is depressed is unusually sad, has an unusually sad mood that doesn't go away. They have a loss of enjoyment, they have a loss of interest in activities that used to be enjoyable, lack of energy, tiredness, and other symptoms include loss of confidence in themselves, poor self-esteem, feeling guilty when they're not really at fault, wishing they were dead in some cases, difficulty in concentrating or making decisions, moving slowly, being agitated, unable to settle, and changes in eating habits, which could either result in weight gain or sometimes weight loss by not eating. Difficulty in sleeping as well. These are some of the symptoms of a depressed person. That's not all of them. That's some of them. And if you've ever had depression, then you will recognise some of those symptoms. And depression is, I mean, it's a cliche to say, well, people say, well, cheer up, life's not bad. What have you got to be depressed about? These kind of cliche kind of questions and comments that people make that don't understand what depression is about. And one author I recommend, Matt Haig, has written about depression and about mental health in general. He's a well-known best-selling author, and he's written about this. And loads of other people have written about depression. Natasha Devon has written a book about the A to Z of mental health conditions as well. Me, myself, I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder in 2012 because I ended up in a secure unit. I was also in another secure unit in 2013. And this was straight on the back of completing a master's and having a fantastic time at the University of Warwick. And I got a distinction. So there's often a clash or a kind of, it's not always straightforward in terms of, well, you succeed in one area and that therefore you will succeed in all areas, or that you are happy in one situation. And for me personally, I'd gone from a fantastic year at Warwick on my master's to nothing. I hadn't got anything really set up, and I ended up going to Vietnam, and that was a short-lived experience because it wasn't really the right choice for me at that moment. And I got there and had a reaction to the local conditions, and a lot of people struggle with overseas conditions. And for me, I've had to decide personally to not go abroad for a year at a time for a full-time fixed job. I have decided to do things close to home. I'll go abroad for holidays and for trips and for conferences, but not to work full-time, because homesickness is a key issue for me. Being away from family is a key thing for me, and I've decided not to do that and not to put my family through it anymore, because they worry about me. They worry about me when I'm not great or haven't been great, and so I've had to make decisions like that. And now I work close to home. Now I work in Norwich, But don't work full-time at the moment. I like to do bits and pieces. I don't like to work for one employer all of the time, although I do BrazTesol in the summer, which is more intensive. Another condition, as I said, anxiety, generalized anxiety disorder, I was alluded to, which is what I have. And that's the symptoms of that is when a person might experience, fast or pounding heart, physical symptoms like stomach pain, tremors, muscle tension, inability to relax, being restless, irritability, sleep disturbances, mind going blank, blackouts, difficulty in concentration. We talk about attention deficiency a lot with teenagers and kids these days, but it can go to adults as well. And anxiety, general anxiety, is a catch-all term, generalized anxiety disorder. Yeah, I mean, I wanted the more sexy diagnosis of bipolar, because I think it sounds sexier, bipolar, but it's not for the people that go through that condition. And I have family members who have it. I have good friends that have bipolar, and that, as you probably know, is extreme highs, extreme lows, but not like mood swings up and down, up and down. It's just long periods of highs and long periods, and very, very creative and active periods, and long periods of depression. So you go from mania to depression, and backwards and forwards between those two, and you have long periods of that. Other diagnosed conditions: mania, as I say, hypomania, schizophrenia, psychosis. A lot of people have obsessive compulsive disorder, which isn't just obsessive about hygiene, although that is often a common thing. And it's wrong to call people, that like to be organised, I like to be organised, calling them a little bit OCD, because that's not really quite right. People say a little bit OCD, but it's not quite the right way to describe somebody. If you have OCD, you know how debilitating, how paralysing OCD can be. Of course, many of these conditions are interchangeable. They overlap, and a person may suffer one or more in their lifetime. The key issue here is, can you recognize the symptoms without someone disclosing them? Remember that many of these will be hidden to a manager, a line manager, and unless the employee in our industry states that something is wrong, a manager may have no idea that they are in fact suffering, as I alluded to earlier, that smile on the face, covering it up, fear of reprisals, fear of what would happen, being treated with kid gloves. The use of drink and drugs as well can have an effect on all of these conditions, including the likelihood and be a barrier to treatment or getting better. People smoke and relieve anxiety, but I believe that it actually makes things worse. Psychosis in particular can be caused by alcohol misuse and illegal drugs such as cannabis, hallucinogens, and stimulants. Many employees will use drinking and smoking as coping mechanisms in order to get through, but they may not always be the most healthy option. There are other anxiety conditions, phobias. We all know about fears and phobias, fears of snakes, fears of heights, fears of planes, fears of enclosed spaces, claustrophobia, for example, I get that. Post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, drug and alcohol dependencies and other addictions. And recently, as I mentioned in Malta, gaming has been classified now as a mental health condition, being addicted to gaming. And I've just realized there's a very well-known and fantastic game that's just come out. I'm not a gamer, but a fantastic game's come out. And people get very obsessed and go into these virtual worlds. But gaming addiction as a condition now, diagnosable condition, and that's the World Health Organization who have said that recently, this year in fact. Some people are just overthinkers. They're not diagnosed with anything, but they just overthink, and they are unnecessary worriers, a symptom or cause of some anxieties. And then, of course, there are eating disorders such as bulimia and anorexia. One thing I always draw attention to, and I asked in my survey, is probably the most common thing to suffer from at work or in the workplace is stress. Stress is something that's becoming more and more commonplace, as is burnout. And I've alluded to this in my workshops. I draw on burnout particularly, and I know Rosalie Serra, who may not be watching, has talked about this, and other people. In the recent IATF Voices magazine, there was an article from Monica Rudy, I think, who spoke about burnout, and it comes back to this idea of candle that burns itself, giving off to others, because teachers who care so much and so passionate about teaching and what they do, perfectionism as well is another thing which can lead to burnout, and being overworked, simply overworked. Just pause for a second, because I'm not following everything that's going on in the chat at the moment, but kindly Karen, who's moderating today and introduced me, thank you. She'll collect some. If you've got any questions, you can ask them, and maybe Karen will collect all of these questions, and I'll deal with those at the end. Or I might, if I spot one in the comments, then I'll. I'm going to ask a couple of questions as well in a minute. Just hold out for those. But do ask me some questions. I'll try and answer them as best I can at the end. A manager at work often asks how you're doing. Many employees will reply, "I'm okay." You know, it's a common thing. How are you? How are you? I'm okay. I'm fine. This may be true, but many employees will hide their condition or symptoms and may not be fully upfront about what is going on. I often say that if you ask somebody the same question, in fact, if you ask me the same question, second or third time, dig a little deeper, you might get a different response from just "I'm okay" or "I'm fine." So as I said earlier, often the reprisals, reduced responsibility, risk of losing the job will prevent a proper disclosure in the workplace. Some signs of poor mental health can be observable, but many more are not. And in many countries and cultures around the world, this may be even more the case. Some problems you just simply don't mention. I mean, I had a woman who was, I think, from Hungary, and she came up to me after my talk in Brighton and said, "We just don't talk about it there." I don't know if that's true. I've never been to Hungary, but I'd be interested to know what the situation is in Brazil, where the culture, Brazilian culture, suppresses these kinds of things and keeps it stigmatized and keeps mental health as a stigmatized or taboo topic. I think it's getting better, but I don't know, on the ground what it's like there. Maybe people that are from Brazil or in Brazil and are watching this can comment in the chat box. I'd like to ask you a follow-up question. There's not many people here at the moment, but those that are here, maybe you could just answer this question. What do you think a line manager can do in the workplace? So how can they recognize the signs of stress or similar indicators or of a possible mental health condition? So we've only got about 4 or 5 people in the room, so I'm not expecting lots of comments, and it's a bit difficult to see. I'm having a look now. Hello, Lizzie. Thank you for joining. Hello, Lou. And Luke, you said you were coming, and you have. Thank you very much. Luke's a friend of mine. And okay, so no actual comments. So I'm not. You probably want me to give you all the answers. It's not one. Not one of those webinars where you attend for 40 minutes and you go away with a certificate that says, "Oh, I'm fully trained now in mental health in ELT," or "I know exactly what to do now." It's a very complex topic, as you probably well know. There are no easy fixes. Although, I mean, there are things that teachers do. I mean, the question was, what do you think a line manager can do in the workplace? How can they recognise the signs of stress or other indicators of a possible mental health condition? Well, I mean, I'll draw on one example. I mean, panic attacks. Panic attacks is something that I've had a lot, and I've had them this year. Thank you. Lizzie says, "Pay attention to behaviour patterns." It's true. I mean, if somebody starts to behave differently, if you're responsible for that person, they start to behave differently. Be aware of this. I mean, there's from the teacher side what they say, and then there's also from the line manager. I'm actually more interested in what the line managers or the bosses, employers can do, where they can be looking out for signs of distress or changes, to say. And it says it's not always easy to spot because people hide the fact that they're going through something for fear of reprisals, as I said. Panic attacks. I mean, I had one in the summer I worked for Into on a pre-sessional course in Norwich, and I did it last year with no problems whatsoever, and I did it this year again, no problems whatsoever. But in the first week or second week, I think it was, after the teacher meeting, I suddenly had a panic attack, and I don't know why. I don't know why I would have a panic attack in a very familiar, very reassuring, very happy. The place makes me happy. I'm very happy to be there, and I was just having this panic attack, and I wasn't calling the line manager, but one of the senior teachers took me to one side and spoke to me and shared his own experience, and helped me to calm down, return to normal breathing patterns, And that's what I needed, because it was just, I don't know what it was. Sometimes you don't always know why. I mean, I know the chemical reason what happens during a panic attack, but you don't always know exactly what it is. You just feel the symptoms. You get the palpitations, you get the racing heart, you get the sweaty palms, and the hyperventilation. That, if it's really, really bad, then you get this. And it's often an irrational fear, or sometimes just a thought. I know in my case, it's just a thought that triggers things off, and it's a panic cycle, they call it. They're not life-threatening, and a line manager can deal with it by being with that person and helping them to return to a sort of normal breathing pattern, and give them reassurances. Maybe not ask too many questions, because when you're going through the hyperventilation or the physical signs of panic, then you don't want to ask more. You don't say what's going through your mind. What is it that's causing this? What can we do? But you might be able to deal with that afterwards. But when you are having a panic attack, in terms of the thought processes, you are thinking at 1,000 miles an hour, and you are thinking all kinds of mostly irrational things. And so from the line management, the person who is dealing with the person having a panic attack in the workplace needs to maybe take them to one side, take them to a safe place, and just give them lots of reassurance. Reassurance is so important, because in the person's mind, they're thinking all kinds of things like, I can't do this, it's not going to happen, it's not going to happen. And even talking about it now brings up some of the emotions and some of the feelings of what has gone in through my head when I've gone through this. I asked at a workshop in Malta recently about half the room, or 1/3 of the room, said that they'd suffered from a panic attack. And if you've had a panic attack, you've had all the symptoms of a panic attack, you generally know what it's like to go through that. Okay, so what about another question? Again, there's not many people in the room, so I feel like I'm going to do a lot more talking and maybe deal with questions at the end rather than a workshop format. But I was going to ask what can teachers do themselves to improve their own mental well-being? I should say, maybe Lizzie might respond, or Luke might respond. What can, I've spoken about line managers, how they might be able to help. But what about, I'm just checking the chat box. Luke said, be aware of your staff, pay attention to their mood, possible mood swings. So this is in answer to the thing before, mood swings and changes to behaviour, which Lizzie also mentioned. Raising awareness of line managers. I mean, at the moment, there's a serious lack of training of line managers, DOSs, ADOSs, and the like. I'm going to move on because I've got 9 minutes left. And I want to leave time for you to ask me questions. One of the questions in my research was, in what ways can an institution support the mental health and well-being of its employees? Having said this, taking responsibility and regaining control of your own thoughts is primarily down to the individual. The individual needs to take some responsibility if they know they are vulnerable in some way. Work in ELT causes many stresses. The length of answers to this question about what can the institution do, probably second in terms of the amount of response I got in the survey, second only to the factors which causes stress. And it builds upon the answers given in that question. There were a mixture of individual circumstances and external issues. The focus on this question is squarely on what the employer or institution can do, but it has obviously importance for line managers and other people responsible for maintaining employee mental health in the workplace. I mean, as I've already alluded to, training is the one biggest issue. I've fed up of hearing about organisations that pay lip service to this and just offer 1 day a year well-being camp or well-being day or half a day, or not really. The anecdotal evidence so far is that not many organisations are doing this. Yes, some are leading the way in this, and I applaud those that are leading the way and tackling this. But training of staff, those that are responsible, like managers, is key here. Plenty of organisations have these CPD weeks, training days. Sometimes it's dressed up as a well-being day. They don't even tackle mental health, kind of this nice umbrella well-being sort of soft approach. However, a lot of the symptoms that teachers particularly feel come out as a result of low pay, challenging working conditions, job insecurity, unfair contracts, and management working in a business environment which treats teachers as resources. Counselling is another thing. Many people said that counselling, awareness sessions, free stress management or mindfulness courses. I try mindfulness occasionally. I try to practice mindfulness. Sometimes I talk to myself, not in a mad way, just in a sort of reassuring sort of way. Taking steps to avoid teacher burnout. Having a designated, informed or even trained person who is responsible for teacher well-being and mental health in the workplace. Union representation. A lot of people are calling for better working conditions and union representation. The local association membership. I know that ELT Ireland have done. They're an advocacy group, and they've done a lot of work in this area. As an example, I mean, the international nature of IATEFL makes it very difficult to support workers' rights in hundreds of different countries and territories. But local organisations can do something, I feel. I mean, there are Facebook groups, and as I've already mentioned, we're talking today on the BrazTesol Mental Health SIG page, and it's the first I've found. There might be others like that, but I haven't come across them. I'd be interested to know there are other Facebook support groups. But improving teachers' paying conditions. A lot of people say, well, this talk is fine. Just improve teachers' paying conditions, and then everything will be fine. It doesn't quite work all the time with depression and other mental health conditions, but, you know, it is almost a universal truth. Many teachers get into the profession for the love of the teaching, but are often poorly rewarded. Acknowledge the human part of human resources. I mean, this whole elephant in the staff room, a book by Chris Eyre, and even Monica's Ruder's IATEFL Voices article on burnout was talking about the elephant in the staff room, that thing that's so obvious that we just don't talk about it. And for some people, pay and working conditions is the elephant that causes a lot. So, I mean, I haven't actually alluded to what causes, like ELT causes poor mental health. I think a lot of people who have some conditions or some undiagnosed conditions go into the industry anyway, the business anyway, and suffer. But there are things that can be done. Work to free teachers from discrimination, from bullying, harassment, and abuse. I know that TORSIG do a lot of advocacy and pushing of this factor. And finally, there is legislation for discrimination in the workplace in the UK. There is legislation in place. Workplace discrimination for people suffering from a mental health condition or illness. You can't discriminate against something legally. But I don't know what the situation is like in Brazil. I haven't got many people in the room at the moment, but maybe in the comments, people can talk about the situation in Brazil. Right now, there's a very tense election about to happen, and it could go very, very to the right. And it's, for me, it sounds very, very a scary time. These external things can have an effect on a person's well-being, regardless of the industry that they work in. I mean, I would ask, I'm not expecting to get an answer now, but is there any legislation which protects those who might be discriminated in Brazil? Okay, I'm gonna wrap things up there. We're coming about half an hour in, so Karen said to me 30 minutes. That's about 30 minutes, and I'm going to go to see if there's any questions. So just picking up on some comments. Lizzie Pinard said, now depending on the setup, line managers may not see their employees on a daily basis. Okay, yeah. I think reassurance and showing employees they are valued goes a long way. Yeah, agree with that. Luke says raising awareness among line managers. Yeah, I think I might have alluded to that. Be aware of your staff and pay attention to their mood, possible mood swings and changes in behaviour. Yeah, so not many people actually watching live, but I would encourage people to comment and ask questions after this live video has ended. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to take them now. Karen? I'll just give it a moment. I'm not going anywhere. Oh, I just realised I haven't scrolled down. Sorry. As I was talking, I forgot to scroll down, so I'm just going to pick up on some of the comments that were made. Okay, so Luke says teachers shouldn't feel ashamed to bring it up with the line manager. I think there's still a lot of stigma around us. Yeah, so Luke, yeah, there is still a lot of stigma. And the Time to Change campaign in the UK, I don't think it exists elsewhere. The Time to Change is a specific UK-led campaign to end discrimination for people that suffer from mental health and to try and end the stigma. So Time to Change UK. As I said, I'm an associate of Mind. I volunteered for Mind. I do regular things for Mind, which is a mental health charity. in the UK. Karen says in Brazil, mental health issues are not taken seriously. Yeah, culture. We're talking about this culture where, and I'm very interested in what the situation is like in Brazil. Whether there is a culture where you can't say these things, mental health issues, depression, anxiety, all these things, they're not taken seriously. And Fernando was alluding to that in his section, The Black Dog in the Classroom, recently in this very page. Yeah, so we don't have to look like we've got any questions now, but that doesn't mean there aren't questions. And I know with this topic, a lot of people are a bit, they're not always able to ask the questions or verbalise what they want to say or even write it down. So I do encourage people after this live session has finished to make your comments, to ask questions, and if anybody wants to contact me directly, I think via Karen and via the page, I can give you my email address. I will just share the link of my research. So the research that I did last December was published in April, around the time of my talk in Brighton, ITF conference. And if you go to my blog, in fact, there was lots of, every other blog post is about mental health. Well, it is now anyway. It used to be my thing. And I think I've gone from being the mental guy to the mental health guy in EOT. And that's something that Grace Alcini will recognise because it seemed to happen in conference. So have a look at that link. I mean, by all means, have a look at other things that I've written about this year. In fact, a fantastic coming out about epilepsy by Kate Corey Wright, which was even more popular than my blog about my post about mental health. Yeah, so I think we're probably going to end it there, and the recording will be up for people to watch later in their own time, and to comment and ask questions in their own time. And I'll try, and I'll spend the next 24 hours going back in and keep looking and trying to answer some of those questions. Or you can send me a private message on Facebook. I'm also on Twitter @TeacherPhilly. Don't know, so do follow me on Twitter @TeacherPhilly. And yeah, let's call it a wrap there. Yeah, thanks. Thank you. Thanks for coming.